Francis's large land and slaveholdings in several states made a mightier impression on her than his all too frequent letters of love and devotion. Just 6 years earlier, she had lost her heart to the handsome Colonel William Crittenden from Kentucky, a young soldier who was fated to be executed in Cuba.
There he was captured and put to death, but not before he refused to kneel to his executioners and proudly exclaimed, "A Kentuckian kneels to none except his God, and always dies facing his enemy."
The free flag of Cuba was Lucy's heartfelt and headstrong response to the loss of her true love in the filibustering expedition to Cuba. Writing under the pen name of H.M. Hardeman, Lucy wove exciting tales of brave and handsome martyrs. They fought in her book only for the freedom of the tiny island, fearlessly leading the resistance against the occupation of the Spanish tyrants.
What life is more sublime than one given to a nation struggling for the principles of moral and political freedom?
When no letter came from Lucy for 56 days, he gave up all hope of ever making Miss Holcomb the third Mrs. Pickens. Despite strong local support, Francis had lost his lead in the contentious race for the Senate seat to fellow plantation owner James Henry Hammond. Now, with no political agenda and not a word won from Miss Lucy, Francis made the decision to accept the ambassadorship to Russia offered to him by President Buchanan. He wrote one final letter, notifying Miss Holcomb that since he had not received a definite acceptance of his marriage proposal, he was off to assume the post of ambassador to Russia in May. Suddenly, out of the blue, Lucy agreed to marry Francis at Wyalusing, the Holcomb family home in Marshall, Texas, on April 26, 1858. Although it grieved her mother that she would marry the much older Francis, Lucy believed she was sacrificing what romantic love she may have hoped to find in order to secure her future and reverse her father's financial troubles. She was often heard to say,
"Submissiveness is not my role, but certain platitudes on certain occasions are among the innocent deceits of the sex."
May 8th, 1858 was the day I welcomed the lovely spirits that would become my closest companions for the next 4 decades, Lucy Petway Holcomb Pickens and Lucinda. Cinda, as she was called by the family, was given to Lucy by her mother as a wedding present. A gift of a human being was hard for me to understand, although this peculiar institution existed within my walls long before their arrival. The love I saw in Lucy's eyes was not for Francis, hardly for Francis. But I'd barely 1 week to get to know the sparkling step of Lucy's slippers on my floors, or to get a chance to introduce Cinda to the stillness of my parlor just at dusk, before they were all off again. Earlier that week, I had heard Francis tell his manservant, Tom, that Russia might be too inhospitable a climate for him. Francis also made it very clear to him that as they passed through New York, into Europe, and on to Russia, he would be considered a free man.
Master Colonel Pickens, your father, my old master, died in my arms on the banks of the Mississippi. I took from his pocket $1,300 and his gold watch, and I came on foot and brought it to you safely in Carolina. And if you die in Russia, you shall die in my arms, like your father.
So, passage was booked for the Pickens entourage aboard the British steamship Persia, the largest, most modern vessel afloat at the time. Charles Judkins was the charismatic captain. It took all his powers of persuasion to convince the new Mrs. Pickens to leave the safety of her New York hotel to sail on his ship to Europe. But leave America she eventually did. Ironically, it was Frances and the rest of the party who were languishing in their staterooms with seasickness. But not my Lucy. She felt utterly invigorated by the salt air. Finally, my little family arrived in St. Petersburg in July 1858. However, Lucy's royal greeting was far more than just cordial.
Lucy has been going with much company. At a large ball, the Emperor singled her out and led her to the stand reserved for the imperial family. Tom goes in full livery and is very much courted. He says to me that the other servants here in St. Petersburg think he is a king in his country, and I his prime minister.
But regardless of the warmth of the Russian welcome, Lucy was distressed with the blatant infidelity of the Tsar. Lucy decided to distract herself from her homesickness by teaching Tom, Cinda, and her new husband to speak French. And so she set about tutoring them. Tom and Lucinda were quick studies. Francis, on the other hand, did not share their innate ability to master languages other than his own.
Bonjour.
When the Tsarina discovered that Lucy was expecting a child, she demanded the best medical care for her dear new friend. Oh, yes, there was some speculation that her child might be the offspring of the Tsar, but a single look at the baby's face, and it was evident that this was indeed the daughter of Francis and a relative of the red earth of Edgefield. The Tsarina proclaimed herself the godmother, adding the names Olga and Neva to the Frances Eugenia her parents had already given her. It was her Russian wet nurse, Mumka, who ultimately called her by the name that would follow her for the rest of her life, Dushka, or Little Darling. However, the royal celebrations and whispered innuendos did nothing but magnify the abject heartsickness of my Lucy.
If Colonel Pickens had said, "Take your child and go to your mother. Go rather than suffer such agony," if he had done this, I would have felt bound to him forever.
The frigid Russian winter proved too much for Frances. Lucy had made a solemn promise to herself that she would take her baby girl and leave Russia. When Frances became deathly ill, she repented of her incessant harping.
Never, never judge harshly of me, for you cannot see or understand my situation.
Then, after almost 3 years, Lucy and her family were home again. Her life as the mistress of Edgewood was finally about to begin. But within the month, her new rank as the wife of the governor would blow over her like the blustery autumn winds of this November day in 1860.